Maria Rodriguez had been cleaning the Hartwell Concert Hall for nearly 3 years. Every morning she arrived at 5 o'clock when the city was still dark and quiet. She would unlock the heavy side door with her key, the one that staff used, and step into the magnificent building that smelled of polished wood and old velvet. At 53 years old, Maria knew how to be invisible. She had learned this skill well over the years. The musicians who rehearsed in the hall rarely looked at her. The administrative staff sometimes nodded politely but never asked her name. The wealthy patrons who attended concerts in their expensive clothes walked past her as if she were part of the furniture. And that was fine with Maria. She preferred it that way. Being invisible meant she could work in peace, lost in her own thoughts while her hands scrubbed and cleaned and polished. The concert hall was beautiful, perhaps the most beautiful building Maria had ever worked in. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Red velvet curtains framed the stage. The seats were upholstered in deep burgundy fabric that Maria vacuumed carefully each week. But what truly took her breath away was the piano. It sat center stage, a magnificent Steinway grand piano that gleamed under the stage lights. Maria had seen it hundreds of times, but she never grew tired of looking at it. Sometimes, when she was certain no one was around, she would stop her work for just a moment and admire it. The black lacquer surface reflected the lights above like a mirror. The keys were perfectly white and cream, not a smudge or fingerprint visible. It was, without question, the most beautiful instrument Maria had ever seen. This particular morning started like any other. Maria pushed her cleaning cart through the empty corridors, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking slightly on the marble floors. She had already cleaned the lobby and the administrative offices. Now she was making her way to the main performance hall. Tuesday mornings were her favorite because the hall was always empty. No rehearsals were scheduled. No meetings took place. It was just Maria, and the silence and the beauty of the space. She pushed open the heavy doors to the performance hall and wheeled her cart down the aisle. The house lights were on, casting a warm glow over the empty seats. Maria began her routine, starting with the aisles, then working her way toward the stage. She moved efficiently, her movements practiced from years of repetition. When she reached the stage, she climbed the side steps carefully, her knees protesting slightly. Getting older was not easy, especially in a job that required being on your feet all day. But Maria never complained. She had a job. She could pay her rent. She could send money home to her sister in Colombia. That was more than many people had. She walked across the stage, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. The piano sat there waiting as it always did. Maria pulled out her special microfiber cloth, the one she reserved just for the piano. She knew this instrument was worth more than she would earn in 10 years, maybe 20. It deserved to be treated with respect. She began to dust the piano gently, running her cloth along its curves and edges. As she worked, she couldn't help but let her hand linger on the smooth surface. She traced the elegant lines of the music stand. She carefully wiped each individual key, marveling at how perfectly they were aligned. For just a moment, she allowed herself to remember what it felt like to play, to make music, to lose herself in the sound of a piano just like this one. That's when she heard the voice. "What do you think you're doing?" The words echoed through the hall, sharp and cold. Maria jumped, her heart racing. She spun around, her cloth falling from her hands. A man stood in the balcony section, looking down at her. Even from this distance, Maria could see the irritation on his face. He wore an expensive gray suit and his dark hair was styled perfectly. His arms were crossed over his chest. I'm cleaning, sir," Maria stammered, her accent thickening as it always did when she was nervous. "Cleaning?" The man's voice dripped with sarcasm. "It looked to me like you were fondling the instrument." Maria's face burned with embarrassment. "No, sir. I was just dusting. I always dust the piano very carefully. I would never—" "How long have you been standing there?" he interrupted, starting down the stairs from the balcony. His footsteps were loud and deliberate, each one seeming to announce his authority. "Just a few minutes, sir. I'm sorry if I—" "A few minutes?" He reached the main floor and strode down the aisle toward the stage. "A few minutes is a long time to dust one piano. What were you really doing? Daydreaming? Wasting time?" Maria's hands twisted together nervously. No, sir. I was working. I always clean the piano very carefully because I know it's valuable and… Do you know who I am? The man reached the stage and climbed the steps, approaching her with the confidence of someone who owned the space. Maria shook her head. She recognized him vaguely from seeing him in the building, but she didn't know his name or position. I'm James Thornton, the new artistic director of this concert hall. He said it as if she should be impressed, which perhaps she should have been. And I don't tolerate staff wasting time, especially not around instruments that cost more than you make in a decade. I understand, sir. I'm very sorry. I'll finish quickly, and you seemed very interested in the piano. James walked around her, examining her as if she were something suspicious. Were you thinking about playing it? Is that what you were doing? Standing here imagining yourself as some kind of musician? Maria's throat tightened. There was something cruel in his tone, something that enjoyed making her uncomfortable. I was just cleaning, sir. That's all. James walked over to the piano bench and sat down. He gestured at the keys. Since you're so fascinated by this instrument, why don't you play something? Maria's eyes widened. What? No, sir, I couldn't. I insist. His voice was cold now, a command rather than a suggestion. You've been standing here admiring it. Surely you must want to try it. Go ahead. Play something. Sir, please. I need to finish my work. I have many rooms to clean and I said play. James's voice rose slightly. He wasn't shouting, but the authority in his tone was absolute. Consider it part of your work. I want to hear what you can do. Unless you're going to tell me that a cleaning woman thinks she's too good to entertain the artistic director. Maria felt trapped. Her hands were shaking now. She looked at the piano, then at James Thornton's cold, expectant face. She could see exactly what he was doing. He wanted to humiliate her. He wanted to prove a point, to put her in her place. He expected her to fumble at the keys, to prove that she was just a cleaning woman with foolish dreams above her station. 2 other staff members had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of voices. James noticed them and gestured them forward. Come in, he called to them. You'll want to see this. Our cleaning woman is going to give us a performance. The staff members exchanged uncomfortable glances but moved closer. Maria felt her face burning. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to pick up her cleaning cart and leave. But she needed this job. She couldn't afford to anger the artistic director of the concert hall. With trembling legs, Maria moved toward the piano bench. James stood and stepped aside with an exaggerated gesture of courtesy, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He was enjoying this. Maria sat down slowly. The bench felt familiar beneath her, even after all these years. She looked at the keys, those beautiful ivory keys she had been admiring just moments before. Her hands hovered above them, shaking. James crossed his arms, waiting. The 2 staff members stood awkwardly near the stage steps. The empty hall seemed to hold its breath. Maria closed her eyes, and then she began to play. Maria's fingers touched the keys, and for a moment, nothing happened. She sat there frozen, feeling the weight of 3 pairs of eyes on her back. James Thornton stood behind her with his arms crossed, that smug smile still on his face. He was waiting for her to fail, expecting it, looking forward to it. But then something shifted inside Maria. Something she had buried deep for so many years began to surface. She thought about all the times she had been invisible in this building, all the times people had walked past her without seeing her, all the years she had spent pretending that part of her life had never existed. She took a breath. Her hand steadied, and she began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The first notes floated into the air, soft and delicate. Maria's fingers moved across the keys with a grace that came from somewhere deep in her muscle memory. It had been years, so many years, since she had touched a piano like this. But her hands remembered. They remembered everything. The melody grew, filling the empty concert hall with sound that was achingly beautiful. Maria's eyes remained closed. She wasn't in the concert hall anymore. She was back in Bogota, 25 years old, sitting at the conservatory piano, while her teacher nodded approvingly. She was on stage at her first competition, her heart pounding, but her fingers sure. She was in her small apartment practicing late into the night, dreaming of concert halls exactly like this one. Behind her, James Thornton's smile had vanished. His arms slowly dropped to his sides. He took a step closer to the piano, his expression changing from smugness to confusion to something like shock. The two staff members who had been watching stood completely still. One of them, a young woman named Patricia who worked in the box office, brought her hand to her mouth. Tears began forming in her eyes as she listened. Maria's playing was not just technically perfect. It was more than that. There was emotion in every note, feeling in every phrase. This was not someone who had taken a few piano lessons as a child. This was not an amateur who played for fun. This was a musician, a real musician, playing with the skill and artistry of a professional. The piece built toward its emotional center, and Maria's whole body swayed slightly with the music. Her fingers danced across the keys, moving from the gentle melodic passages to the more complex, faster sections. She navigated the difficult runs with ease, her years of training evident in every movement. James moved closer still, now standing right beside the piano where he could see Maria's hands. His face had gone pale. He watched her fingers fly across the keys, executing passages that even many professional pianists struggled with. The technical difficulty of what she was playing was considerable, but she made it look effortless. The piece moved into its final section, the melody returning one last time with even more depth and feeling. Maria poured everything into these last phrases, all the loss and longing and beauty she had carried inside her for so many years. The music swelled and then began to fade, growing softer and softer until it was just a whisper. She played the final notes, letting them hang in the air. Her hands lifted from the keys and rested in her lap. For a moment she kept her eyes closed, not wanting to return to reality, not wanting to face what would come next. The silence that followed was complete. No one moved. No one spoke. The sound of the piano seemed to still echo in the air, even though it had stopped. Then Patricia started clapping. Her applause rang out in the quiet hall, tears now streaming down her face. The other staff member, an older man who worked in maintenance, joined in. His eyes were wide with amazement. Maria slowly opened her eyes. She stood up from the bench, her legs unsteady. She turned to face James Thornton, expecting anger or accusations. Maybe he would say she had damaged the piano by playing it without permission. Maybe he would fire her on the spot. But James just stood there staring at her. His mouth was slightly open. He looked like someone who had just witnessed something impossible. Where? His voice came out rough and he had to clear his throat. Where did you learn to play like that? Maria's hands twisted together in front of her, her earlier nervousness returning. I studied music, sir. A long time ago. Studied music? James's voice rose. That's not just studying music. That's conservatory level. That's professional level. Who are you? Maria looked down at her worn shoes, at her cleaning uniform with the concert hall logo on the pocket. I'm just the cleaning woman, sir. Maria Rodriguez. That's all. No. James shook his head firmly. No, that's not all. Don't tell me that's all. People don't play Chopin like that without serious training. Years of training. Where did you study? Maria hesitated. She hadn't talked about this part of her life in so long. She had learned to keep it buried, to not think about what she had lost. But there was no hiding now. Not after what had just happened. The Conservatory of Music in Bogota, she said quietly. In Colombia. I studied there for 6 years. James ran his hand through his hair, completely thrown off balance. The Conservatory in Bogota? That's a prestigious institution. What happened? Why are you... He gestured at her uniform, unable to finish the sentence. Why was someone who could play like that working as a cleaning woman? Maria took a breath. This was the hard part. The part that still hurt even after all these years. My husband got sick, she began, her accent growing thicker as emotion crept into her voice. Cancer. The treatments cost so much money. Everything we had saved, it all went to doctors and hospitals. I sold my piano to help pay the bills. I sold my music books. Everything. Patricia had come closer now, still crying softly. She reached out and took Maria's hand, squeezing it gently. He died anyway. Maria continued, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 years after the diagnosis. I had nothing left. No savings, no career, nothing. My sister, she lived here in the United States. She said I should come, that there were opportunities here. So I came. How long ago? James asked. 15 years? Maria wiped her eyes with her free hand. I arrived 15 years ago. I was 38. I thought maybe I could find work as a piano teacher or join an orchestra or something. But my credentials from Columbia, they weren't recognized here, and I didn't have money to go back to school, to get American certifications. I had to work. I had to eat. I had to pay rent. So you became a cleaner, James said softly. I became a cleaner. Maria agreed. I worked at a hotel first, then an office building, then here. And I haven't played a real piano in over 10 years. The apartment where I live, it's too small for a piano. Too expensive. I tried to keep playing on electronic keyboards, but it's not the same. Eventually, I just stopped. I told myself that part of my life was over. James was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the piano, then back at Maria. The two staff members watched him, wondering what he would do. Would he apologize for his earlier cruelty? Would he acknowledge how wrong he had been? I need to think about this, he finally said. His voice had lost its earlier coldness, but he still seemed confused, overwhelmed. I have meetings. I need to go. He walked past Maria without another word, his footsteps echoing as he headed up the aisle and out of the performance hall. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. Patricia squeezed Maria's hand again. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, she whispered. Thank you for playing it. Maria nodded, unable to speak. She felt exhausted suddenly, as if playing those few minutes of music had drained all her energy. She had opened a door she had kept closed for so long, and now she didn't know how to close it again. The older maintenance man approached. I've worked here 20 years, he said gruffly. Heard hundreds of pianists play that piano. World-famous musicians. None of them played like you just did. None of them. Maria's eyes filled with tears again. She didn't know if they were tears of sadness or something else, maybe both. She bent down and picked up her cleaning cloth from where it had fallen on the stage. She walked back to her cart, her legs feeling heavy. She still had work to do. 5 more rooms to clean before her shift ended. But as she pushed her cart toward the exit, she couldn't help but glance back at the piano one more time. It sat there gleaming under the stage lights, and for the first time in many years, Maria let herself wonder if maybe, just maybe, that part of her life wasn't completely over after all. The next 3 days were torture for Maria. She came to work each morning with her stomach in knots, wondering if this would be the day she got called into an office and fired. She had played the piano without permission. She had wasted time during work hours. She had made James Thornton look foolish in front of other staff members. Any of these things could be grounds for dismissal. But nothing happened. She didn't see James at all. She cleaned the hallways, the offices, the performance hall, just like always. Other staff members looked at her differently now, though. Word had spread quickly through the building about what had happened. People who had never spoken to her before would smile and nod. A few even stopped to tell her they had heard about her playing, that they wished they could have been there to hear it. Patricia from the box office started bringing Maria coffee during her breaks. They would sit together in the small staff room, and Patricia would ask questions about Columbia, about music, about Maria's life. It was strange having someone actually interested in talking to her. Strange, but also nice. On the 4th day after the incident, Maria was cleaning the second-floor offices when one of the administrative assistants approached her. Maria, Mr. Thornton wants to see you in his office. Maria's heart dropped into her stomach. This was it. She was going to lose her job. She thought about her rent payment due next week, about the money she had promised to send her sister. What would she do? At 53, how easy would it be to find another job? When? Maria asked, her voice barely steady. Now, he's waiting for you. Maria set down her cleaning supplies with shaking hands. She smoothed down her uniform, knowing it wouldn't help much. She was still a cleaning woman about to walk into the artistic director's office. She followed the assistant down the hallway, her footsteps feeling like they were carrying her toward her doom. James Thornton's office was on the 3rd floor, in a corner with large windows overlooking the city. Maria had cleaned it many times, but always when he wasn't there. She had never actually been inside while he was present. The assistant knocked and opened the door. Maria Rodriguez, sir. Send her in. James's voice came from inside. Maria stepped through the doorway, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The office was elegant, with dark wood furniture and framed concert posters on the walls. James sat behind his desk, but he stood up when she entered. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs across from his desk. Maria sat on the edge of the chair, her back straight, ready for whatever was coming. James sat back down and was quiet for a moment, looking at some papers on his desk. When he finally looked up at her, his expression was different from before. The coldness was gone. He looked almost uncomfortable. "I've spent the last few days doing research," he began. "I made some calls to colleagues in South America. To the conservatory in Bogota." Maria's eyes widened. He had checked her story. Of course he had. "They remembered you," James continued. "The director of the piano program, Professor Mendez, he remembered you very well. He said you were one of the most talented students they had in that decade. He was disappointed when you left and never came back." Maria felt her throat tighten. Professor Mendez. She hadn't heard that name in so many years. He had been so kind to her, so encouraging. "He told me about the competitions you won, the performances you gave. He said you were being considered for a scholarship to continue your studies in Europe." James paused. "He was sad to hear what happened to you, what you've been doing all these years." Maria didn't know what to say. She just nodded slightly. "I also spoke to several musicians who have played in this hall," James went on. "I described your performance to them, told them what I witnessed. They all said the same thing. That level of skill doesn't just disappear. You may not have played regularly for years, but you're still a pianist, a real pianist. Why are you telling me this?" Maria finally found her voice. "Are you going to fire me?" "Fire you?" James looked genuinely surprised. No, I'm not going to fire you." Relief flooded through Maria, but she was still confused. "Then what?" James stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "I need to apologize to you, Maria. What I did the other day was cruel. I was trying to humiliate you. I wanted to prove that you were just a cleaning woman who didn't belong near that piano." He turned to face her. "I was completely wrong, and I'm sorry." Maria sat very still. In all her years of cleaning, of being invisible, no one like James Thornton had ever apologized to her for anything. "I've been thinking a lot about talent," James continued, "about how much of it gets wasted in this world. People who have gifts but never get the chance to use them. It's not fair. It's not right." He came back to his desk and pulled out a folder. "I want to offer you something. This concert hall has a community outreach program. We teach music to children from families who can't afford private lessons. Kids from immigrant communities, low-income neighborhoods. The program has been struggling. The teacher we had quit last month, and we haven't found a replacement." Maria's heart began to beat faster. She had a feeling about where this was going, but she was afraid to hope. "I want you to run the program," James said, looking directly at her. "Not as a cleaning woman. As a music teacher, as the assistant director of community education." The words hung in the air. Maria couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "I know you don't have American credentials," James continued quickly, "but I've spoken with the board of directors. Given your training and experience, and given that this is a community program and not a formal music school, they're willing to make an exception. You'd need to go through a background check, obviously, but assuming that goes through fine, the position is yours if you want it." "I don't understand," Maria whispered. "The salary, it would be more than you make as a cleaner, yes. Not a fortune, but a living wage. You'd have an office, access to all the practice rooms and instruments. You'd teach group classes twice a week and have office hours for individual students who need extra help." James pulled out another paper. "This is the salary and benefits package. Take a look." Maria took the paper with trembling hands. The number she saw made her dizzy. It was almost 3 times what she currently made. "With benefits, health insurance, paid vacation, but why?" she asked, looking up at him. "Why would you do this?" James was quiet for a moment. "Because I was wrong about you. Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted scrubbing floors. And because," he paused, seeming to struggle with the words, "because I've spent my whole career in classical music, and I've seen how it shuts people out, how it only welcomes certain people from certain backgrounds. You could have been playing in concert halls around the world, but life happened and the door closed. Maybe this is a way to open a different door, for you and for the kids you'll teach." Maria looked down at the paper in her hands. Her vision was blurring with tears. "These children? she said softly. They come from families like mine? Yes. Many of them are children of immigrants. Their parents work hard jobs to give them opportunities. Some of these kids have real talent, but they'll never get noticed because they don't have access to the right schools or teachers. Maria thought about herself at 10 years old, begging her mother for piano lessons. Her mother had saved for months to afford them, working extra hours at the restaurant. She thought about all the children who had dreams but no way to reach them. I'll do it, she said, her voice stronger now. When do I start? A smile crossed James's face, the first genuine smile Maria had seen from him. 2 weeks. That gives us time to finish the paperwork and for you to prepare. The program starts in September, but we'll need to do some planning before then. Maria stood up, still clutching the paper. Her legs felt weak, like she might fall over. Mr. Thornton, I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. You don't need to thank me. You earned this. He extended his hand. I look forward to working with you, Maria. As a colleague. Maria shook his hand, and for the first time since she had arrived in this country 15 years ago, she felt like someone truly saw her. Not as a cleaning woman, not as someone invisible, but as Maria Rodriguez, pianist and teacher. As she walked out of his office and back down the hallway, she passed her cleaning cart sitting where she had left it. She looked at it for a long moment, thinking about the 3 years she had pushed it through these halls. Soon she wouldn't need it anymore. Soon she would walk these same hallways as a teacher, as a musician. She thought about the children she would meet, the ones who dreamed of music but thought it was impossible. She would tell them her story. She would show them that it's never too late, that talent doesn't disappear, that sometimes doors open when you least expect them to. Maria picked up her cart and continued her work. She still had 2 more weeks of cleaning ahead of her. But now every push of the cart felt different. She wasn't just a cleaning woman anymore. She was a pianist who was finally coming home. Maria's last 2 weeks as a cleaning woman passed in a blur. During the day, she finished her shifts as usual, but her mind was already racing ahead to what came next. At night, she stayed up late planning lessons, remembering the teaching methods her own professors had used. She hadn't taught anyone in years, and the thought both excited and terrified her. On her final day of cleaning, several staff members brought her flowers and cards. Patricia hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. Even the security guard who worked the night shift shook her hand and told her he was proud of her. Maria had spent 3 years being invisible in this building, and now suddenly everyone wanted to celebrate her. Her first official day as Assistant Director of Community Education felt surreal. Maria walked through the front entrance of the concert hall instead of the side staff door. She wore a simple blue dress she had bought on sale, her nicest pair of shoes, and carried a bag with her notebooks and teaching materials. The security guard at the front desk smiled at her. Good morning, Ms. Rodriguez. Your office is ready. Ms. Rodriguez. Not Maria the cleaner. Ms. Rodriguez the teacher. Her office was small but bright, with a window overlooking the street. There was a desk, a bookshelf, and a small upright piano in the corner. When she saw that piano, Maria had to sit down. Her own piano. In her own office. She ran her fingers over the keys, playing a simple scale. The sound made her smile. James stopped by mid-morning to check on her. Everything okay? Do you have what you need? It's perfect, Maria said. Thank you again for this opportunity. The first class is next Tuesday, James reminded her. We have 23 students enrolled, ages 8 to 16. Most of them have never touched a piano before. 23 students. 23 children who would walk through those doors looking for something, hoping for something. Maria felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders. The weekend before the first class, Maria could barely sleep. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would introduce herself, how she would make these children feel welcome. She remembered her first day at the conservatory, how nervous she had been, how her teacher had made her feel like she belonged there. Tuesday evening arrived. Maria stood in the large rehearsal room where the classes would take place. She had arranged chairs in a semicircle facing the grand piano. She had printed out name tags. She had prepared simple handouts about reading music. Everything was ready except her nerves. At 6 o'clock, the children started arriving with their parents. They came in small groups, looking around the concert hall with wide eyes. Most of them had never been inside a building like this before. Maria greeted each family at the door, shaking hands with parents and smiling at the shy children who hid behind their mothers and fathers. There was a tiny girl named Lucia, only 8 years old, whose parents spoke Spanish. When Maria answered them in Spanish, their faces lit up with relief. There was a lanky teenage boy named David who slouched in his chair and looked like he didn't want to be there. His mother had clearly forced him to come. There were twins, a quiet girl who clutched a worn notebook, a boy who couldn't stop bouncing with excitement. When all 23 students had arrived, Maria stood in front of them and took a deep breath. "Welcome," she said, her voice warm but steady. "My name is Maria Rodriguez, and I'm going to be your piano teacher. Before we start, I want to tell you something about myself." The children looked at her with curious eyes. Some of the parents lingered near the back of the room wanting to see what would happen. "I grew up in Colombia, in a city called Bogota. My family didn't have much money. My mother worked in a restaurant and my father fixed cars. But I loved music. I loved it more than anything in the world." Maria walked slowly in front of the group as she spoke. "When I was 10 years old, I heard someone play the piano for the first time, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I begged my mother for lessons. She saved money for months to afford them." Little Lucia was nodding, her eyes fixed on Maria. "I practiced every single day. Sometimes my hands hurt, sometimes I wanted to quit. But I kept going because I had a dream. And you know what? That dream came true. I got to study music at a conservatory. I got to perform in concert halls. I became a real pianist, so why are you teaching us?" David the teenager spoke up, his tone slightly challenging. "If you were so good, why aren't you famous or something?" Some of the parents gasped at his rudeness, but Maria smiled. "That's a good question, David. Life doesn't always go the way we plan. I had some hard times. My husband got sick. I had to stop playing to take care of him and to work. I moved to this country and had to start over. For many years, I didn't play piano at all. I worked as a cleaning woman, actually. Right here in this building." The children looked surprised. Even David sat up a little straighter. "But here's what I learned," Maria continued. "Music doesn't leave you. Even when I wasn't playing, the music was still inside me. And now I get to share it with all of you. That's why I'm here. Because I know what it's like to dream of something and think it's impossible. I want to show you that it's not impossible." She walked to the piano and sat down. "Let me play something for you." Maria played a piece by Mozart, something bright and cheerful and not too complicated. She wanted them to hear something beautiful but not so difficult that it seemed unreachable. When she finished, the children clapped enthusiastically. Even David was clapping. "That's what we're going to work toward," Maria said. "Not next week, not next month. But if you practice and work hard, someday you'll be able to play pieces like this, maybe even better ones. Now who wants to try?" Every single hand went up. The class flew by. Maria taught them about the piano keys, about middle C, about posture and hand position. She had each child come up individually and play a single note, praising every one of them. By the end of the 2 hours, they were all playing simple 5-note patterns. The sound of 23 children playing together was chaotic and wonderful. As the families left, parents kept stopping to thank Maria. Lucia's mother hugged her and said something in Spanish about hope and opportunities. David's mother apologized for his earlier comment, but Maria waved it away. He asked an honest question. I like honest questions. When the last family had left, Maria sat alone in the rehearsal room. Her feet hurt. Her voice was hoarse from talking so much, but she felt more alive than she had in 15 years. James appeared in the doorway. "How did it go?" "It was perfect," Maria said, and she meant it. Over the next few weeks, the classes became the highlight of Maria's existence. She learned each child's personality, their strengths and struggles. Lucia had tiny hands but incredible focus. David acted tough but practiced more than anyone. The twins competed with each other constantly. The quiet girl turned out to have a natural gift for hearing harmony. Maria stayed late after every class to help students who needed extra time. She created special exercises for the ones who struggled and challenged the ones who advanced quickly. She learned about their lives, their families, their dreams. Some wanted to be concert pianists. Others just liked making music. It didn't matter to Maria. She loved them all. One evening, about 6 weeks into the program, James came to observe a class. He sat quietly in the back while Maria led the children through a lesson on reading sheet music. Afterward, when the students were practicing individually, he approached her. "This program has gotten attention," he said. "Good attention. The board is impressed. Parents are calling asking how to enroll their children for next semester. Really? Maria felt a surge of pride. There's something else, James said. We're planning a winter concert in December. All the musicians who perform here regularly will participate. I'd like your students to perform too. Just a small piece, something simple. Would they be ready? Maria thought about her 23 students. They had only been playing for 6 weeks, but she saw the progress they had made, the confidence growing in them. They'll be ready, she promised. That night, Maria stayed in her office long after everyone had gone home. She sat at her small piano and played, thinking about the concert. Her students would perform on that big stage, under those lights in front of an audience, the same stage where she had once been forced. To play as a humiliation had become the place where she found her purpose again, and now it would become the place where her students discovered their own dreams were possible. She smiled to herself in the empty office. Sometimes she thought life breaks your heart, but if you're patient, if you keep going, sometimes it puts the pieces back together in ways you never expected. The weeks leading up to the winter concert were a whirlwind of preparation. Maria's students practiced with an intensity that surprised even her. They knew this was special. They knew people would be watching. Children who had never performed in front of anyone except their families would now play on one of the city's most prestigious stages. Maria chose a simple piece that all 23 students could play together. It was an arrangement of a folk melody, adapted so that even the newest students could participate. The more advanced students would play the melody, while the beginners played simple accompanying parts. Everyone would have a role. Everyone would be heard. But there was something else Maria was planning, something she hadn't told anyone about yet. James had asked if she would perform a solo piece as well. At first she had said no. This concert was for the children, not for her. But James had insisted. The donors and board members wanted to see the teacher who had transformed the program. They wanted to hear the woman whose story had inspired so much attention. Finally, Maria had agreed. She would play one piece, just one. She chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, a powerful and emotional work that had always meant something special to her. It was the piece she had played at her final competition in Columbia, 25 years ago. Playing it now felt like closing a circle. The week before the concert, Maria's sister called from Columbia. "I heard about what's happening," she said, her voice crackling over the phone line. "Mama would be so proud of you." Maria's mother had died 8 years ago, never knowing that her daughter would return to music. The thought made Maria's eyes sting with tears. "I wish she could see this." "She can see it," her sister said firmly. "I know she can." The day of the concert arrived cold and clear. Maria woke up before dawn, too nervous to sleep. She made coffee and sat by her window watching the sun rise over the city. In a few hours, everything would change again. Her students would discover what it felt like to perform, and she would step onto that stage not as a cleaning woman being humiliated, but as a pianist choosing to play. She arrived at the concert hall early. The backstage area buzzed with activity as professional musicians prepared for their performances. Maria found her students gathered in a large dressing room, most of them with their parents. The children wore their best clothes. Little Lucia had a red velvet dress. David wore a suit that looked borrowed from an older brother. They all looked terrified. "Come here, everyone," Maria said, gathering them into a circle. "I know you're nervous. That's normal. I'm nervous too. You are?" Lucia asked, her eyes wide. "Of course I am. Every performer gets nervous. But here's the secret." Maria looked at each child in turn. "When you're out there on that stage, don't think about the audience. Don't think about making mistakes. Think about the music. Think about how it makes you feel. Play for yourselves first, and everything else will follow." She made them practice breathing exercises, the same ones her teacher had taught her decades ago. Slowly, the panic in their faces eased a little. The concert began at 7 o'clock. The hall was full, every seat taken. Maria peeked through the curtain and felt her stomach flip. She saw board members in the front rows, donors in expensive jewelry, music critics with notebooks, and scattered throughout, the families of her students, many of them dressed in their best clothes, looking proud and nervous. The professional musicians performed first. A string quartet played Vivaldi. A soprano sang arias from famous operas. A cellist performed a Bach suite. The audience applauded enthusiastically after each performance. These were the kind of musicians who usually filled this stage. Accomplished, polished, professional. Then it was time for Maria's students. James walked onto the stage to introduce them. "Our next performers are very special," he told the audience. "These 23 young people have been studying piano for only 4 months. They come from families throughout our city, many of whom have never had access to classical music education before. Their teacher is Maria Rodriguez, who many of you have read about in recent weeks. Please welcome the Heartwell Community Music Program." The audience applauded as the children filed onto the stage. They had practiced this entrance many times, but actually doing it in front of hundreds of people was different. Some walked confidently. Others looked like they might faint. They took their positions at the 4 grand pianos that had been arranged on stage, 6 students per piano. With a few standing to play percussion instruments Maria had added for rhythm. Maria stood at the conductor's position. She caught David's eye and smiled. She nodded at Lucia, who sat at the first piano looking tiny on the bench. She took a breath. Then she raised her hands and the children began to play. The piece started slowly with the beginners playing a simple pattern. Then the melody came in sweet and clear. It wasn't perfect. A few notes were missed. The timing wobbled once or twice. But there was something beautiful about it anyway, something pure. These were children making music, expressing something they felt, sharing it with the world. Maria's eyes blurred with tears as she conducted. She saw Lucia's face completely focused. She saw David playing with surprising tenderness. She saw all of them transformed by the act of creating something together. When the piece ended, there was a moment of silence. Then the audience exploded into applause. People stood up clapping and cheering. Maria saw parents crying. She saw board members wiping their eyes. The children looked stunned, then broke into huge smiles. They had done it. As the students filed off stage, hugging each other and laughing with relief, James returned to the microphone. "And now Maria Rodriguez will perform Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor." Maria's heart pounded as she walked to the piano. This was it. The same stage where James had demanded she play all those months ago. The same piano she had dusted as a cleaning woman, never imagining she would perform on it. But everything was different now. She was different now. She sat at the bench and placed her hands on the keys. The hall fell silent. Maria closed her eyes and let herself fall into the music. The prelude began with its famous dark crashing chords. Maria's hands moved with power and precision, drawing out every ounce of emotion from the instrument. This was music about struggle and triumph, about darkness and light. It was her story, and the story of everyone who had ever lost something and found it again. Her fingers flew across the keys in the faster middle section, executing the complex passages with the skill of the trained pianist she had always been. The audience sat mesmerized. This wasn't just good. This was exceptional. This was the kind of playing people remembered for years afterward. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, Maria poured everything into it. All the pain of losing her husband, all the loneliness of those years cleaning floors, all the joy of finding her way back to music, all the hope she had for her students and their futures. The final chords rang out, powerful and definitive. Maria's hands lifted from the keys. For a moment she sat very still. Then the audience erupted. The applause was deafening. People jumped to their feet, shouting and cheering. Maria stood and turned to face them, and what she saw took her breath away. In the front row, James Thornton was clapping hard, his face showing something like awe. Next to him, board members were standing and applauding. Throughout the hall, people were on their feet. But what made Maria's tears finally spill over was seeing her students in the wings, all 23 of them, clapping and cheering louder than anyone. Maria bowed, her hand over her heart. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Later, after the concert ended, people crowded around her. Critics asked for interviews. Donors wanted to fund the program. Parents thanked her with tears in their eyes. But the moment that mattered most was when little Lucia tugged on her dress. "Ms. Rodriguez," the girl said, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Maria knelt down so she was eye level with Lucia. "No, sweetheart. When you grow up, you should be exactly like you, but better. That's what I want for all of you, to be yourselves but with music in your lives making everything richer." James found her as the crowd was thinning. "That was extraordinary, Maria, truly extraordinary." "Thank you," Maria said, "for everything, for giving me this chance. I should be thanking you. This program, these kids, what you've built here, It's changing lives, he paused. The board wants to expand the program. Add more classes, more students. They want you to hire additional teachers. Would you be interested in becoming the full director? Maria looked around the concert hall, this place that had been so many things to her. A workplace where she had been invisible, a stage where she had been humiliated, a school where she had found her purpose, and now a home. Yes, she said simply. I would be honored. That night, Maria was the last to leave the concert hall. She walked through the empty performance space one more time, letting her footsteps echo in the silence. She climbed onto the stage and stood where she had performed just hours earlier. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, about loss and perseverance, about how sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best ones, about how being seen, really seen, can change everything. Maria had learned that it's never too late. Never too late to return to what you love. Never too late to share your gifts. Never too late to become who you were always meant to be. She smiled to herself in the empty hall, then turned off the lights and headed home. Tomorrow she would start planning for the expanded program. Tomorrow there would be new students to teach, new dreams to nurture. But tonight, she would simply rest and remember the sound of 23 children making music, and the feeling of her own hands on the piano keys, finally home where they belonged.